All right, welcome everyone. My name is Kristen Nevital. I'm the director of the Mendocino County Cannabis Department. And with me today, I have Nina Holloway assisting us with all things technical. I'm sure some of you got the same message this morning. Streaming is working off the bat, so we're thrilled to announce that. But we are going to give folks just a couple more minutes to join today's meeting. And again, starting a little bit late. It has been a very packed day for all of us here at the Cannabis Department. So we're just arriving back at our desks from another meeting and happy to get talking or be discussing the equity program. So let's just give it another 3 minutes and start promptly at 3:40. We still have some folks populating the webinar or meeting today. And then we'll go ahead and jump in. And maybe because I don't have a slide prepared for it, I'll use the 3 minutes here just to remind people about how to participate in today's meeting. We will be making time available towards the end of the meeting for question and answer and discussion. We'll ask folks to use the raise hand feature if they'd like to ask verbal questions during that time. You can raise your hand at any time during this meeting to get into the queue. And if you're on the Zoom app, that raise hand feature is going to be found in your toolbar, generally located at the bottom or the top of your screen. It just looks like a little hand. Clicking on that hand will raise your hand. Clicking on it again will lower your hand. We also have the Q&A chat feature on today. The Q&A chat feature is in the same toolbar as the raise hand feature. It looks like a chat box and it says Q&A on it. So if you would like to enter a comment or enter a question into that Q&A feature, please just hit the chat box feature or icon. It will pop up in a second box. Someone's already found it and we're getting questions already. So go ahead and type it in. That question will come to Nina and I. And I'll do my best to try to monitor that as we go through the slideshow. If I can integrate your question into the presentation, I'll do my best. If not, we'll take some time to go through Q&A, chat box feature questions, and verbal or oral questions at the end of the presentation, kind of go back and forth with those. With that said, if you are not on the Zoom app today and you want to raise your hand, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And from your phone, once we provide you permission to speak and provide your comment, you can use *6 to unmute. If you are on the Zoom platform and you need to unmute, for me, the easiest way when I'm on a large meeting is to find my identity box or the box that identifies myself as a user, hover my cursor on my picture or my name box, and I'll get a blue mute unmute button in the upper right-hand corner. But you may also have a mute feature and unmute feature if you're on the Zoom app in the toolbar where you'll see the Q&A and the raise hand feature. So I'll remind folks about how to participate when we get to the comment period of today's meeting. And it's 3:40, so I'd like to go ahead and get us started. So moving on. I kept the agenda the same, although there are new materials. So we'll talk about funding, we'll talk about program statistics, we'll talk about program updates, and again, we'll have time for questions and answers. And I can't guarantee that we're going to go through this agenda necessarily in that order. LEAP funding. As many of you know, we've been working on spending down round 1 funding and round 2. We have met the goals of spending down both round 1 and round 2 funding, I am pleased to announce. And we have started to spend down just a little tiny bit of round 3 funding. So round 3 funding has to be spent down by May 9th of 2023. And we do anticipate applying for a 4th round of funding this fall. We do not have the solicitation timeline yet from the state, but we are excited to apply for yet another round of funding and keep this program well funded and moving forward. a slide you all might be very familiar with. This just looks at the funding that has come in for rounds 1, 2, and 3, the combination of what those funding amounts are and how they were broken up by the state for spending. I do want to note that the dollar amounts listed here for technical assistance, the $224,570, plus the $83,227 that were set aside for technical assistance in round 1 and round 2. Those dollar amounts were moved into the direct grant pool, and we awarded them to applicants or awardees in the form of direct grant monies. Some kind of more detailed minutia-rich statistics. What we have here is round 1 and 2 grant funding to the tune of just over $2.4 million. Round 3 grant funding to a tune of $2.8 million and change. The waiver program to date has provided $495,245.65 in waivers. We'll look at that breakdown in a minute. I believe my 34 direct grants is incorrect and that we're at a higher number of direct grants awarded. But I think the important part of this slide and what's accurate is to date, we have processed almost 1.8 million in direct grant checks that have gone out to the public. So out of that nearly 8 million, there's 3 checks that we're processing this week right now. So most people have received their checks out of this almost $8 million, and 3 of them are being processed this week. So they're signed, executed, and checks are in the auditor's office being processed. To date, we have spent $294,791 in administrative services for the program. This has gone to the Elevate Impact folks to really assist our applicants and awardees with underwriting of their grant applications. When I first started here in March of 2021, had a part-time department analyst who was with us through the end of May or mid-May-ish of 2021. And we used some of the administrator funds to pay that part-time analyst salary or a paycheck, which totaled $13,032.91. My September to date is incorrect. It should say through September 21 here. My apologies. We have spent nearly $2.6 million in grant funds, which means that we've spent a little over $100,000 out of round 3. We should back up. We've spent all of round 1 funding, all of round 2 funding, and just over or right around $100,000 in round 3 funding. I want to highlight some of the types of projects that have been funded. I haven't updated this since I presented it to the board, so it's a couple weeks old. And if you add it up, it's not going to total the 1.7 million we are talking about today, because as I mentioned, it's a couple weeks old, and I haven't had a chance to go back through and fix these numbers or adjust them upwards. But I do want to say that what we're experiencing is a continuous issuance of checks. So as we're approving more grant agreements, we're processing them through Cobblestone continually. And as they come through Cobblestone and are executed by the awardee and county staff, we're just continuing to process checks. So it's, I would like to use the term seamless. It might not feel seamless to those of you who have been back and forth in the underwriting and approval process, but we haven't stopped conducting reviews, processing grant agreements, or issuing checks, and we intend to continue to do so as they become completed and approved by the department and county staff. So as of earlier this month, we had spent down direct grant funds to the tune of almost $81,000 to help awardees with water system upgrades. Over $188,000 in water storage upgrades, over $312,000 in solar projects. I'm missing a comma in the next one. almost $44,000 in lake and streambed alteration agreement fees, a little over $151,000 in CEQA compliance, environmental cleanup and remediation projects, almost $32,000 in road repair and culvert installation, resulting in reduced watercourse sedimentation, a little over $95,000 in rent and lease agreements, almost $78,000 in facility improvements, including ADA compliance upgrades for facilities or projects. Lots of supplies ranging from electrical wire to soil and amendments to the tune of just over $116,000. Lots of insurance and surety bonds totaling over $76,000. Plenty of fixtures and equipment of all sorts, everything from new computers to help ease the burden of metric to trailers and tractors to help ease the burden or the labor associated with farming. So fixtures and equipment just shy of $252,000. We've been supporting applicants with brand recognition and marketing services, totaling over $34,000, CPA and bookkeeping services for just over $38,000, lots of state licensing fees coming in at $93,000, and a small amount of cannabis testing. Now, a couple of these things on this list might seem, I don't know, surprising to folks. I know, for example, folks have felt challenged by solar projects as are one of the things I want to talk about on this list. I think it's important anytime we're talking about some of these bigger capital improvement projects or larger capital improvement projects that the applicant really clearly describe in that scope of project how these capital improvements will be utilized to support their business. So I want to put it out here verbally. We are hoping to provide some additional guidance in writing, and I think we'll pull that out of the LJAGP manual and application we're working on. But for solar projects, important pieces to moving your solar project forward is explaining in that project scope narrative how much power your project utilizes and how that solar installation that you're proposing in your scope of project is going to meet your business's electrical needs, right? If you have a generator that you're utilizing, please explain how much time you use on that generator and how that solar project is going to hopefully eliminate, but if not eliminate, vastly reduce the need of that internal combustion engine associated with your generator. Now, we did recently do updates to the program manual. So originally solar projects could only be approved when they reduced or eliminated the use of internal combustion engines. That is no longer the case. So even if you don't have a generator that you've declared usage in association to your project, you can still qualify for solar, but we still need to understand in that scope of project narrative how the solar project will cover your business's electrical needs and or offset your business's electrical needs. So we need to understand the business's usage and then how the project is going to help reduce that traditional usage. A couple thoughts on lake or streambed alteration agreement projects. They are not necessarily intuitive when we receive project scopes that say are proposing, 15 segments of culvert for 10 projects that we can identify in your lake or streambed alteration agreement. So please, one of the keys to moving these kind of funded projects forward is helping through that narrative explain how you'll use 15 segments of culvert to complete 11 or 10 projects that are identified in your lake or streambed alteration agreement. And we are looking at the lake or stream bed alteration agreement when we're seeing culvert projects, to make sure that those projects are permitted, providing grant funds to an awardee who does not have permitted lake or stream bed alteration projects poses a heck of a lot of risk to that awardee, not just from potential CEQA violations, but conducting lake or stream bed alteration work without a permit from Department of Fish and Wildlife really can be not only a headache, but incredibly costly for the applicant or the property owner who's conducting that work. So we do want to be able to match up your proposal for lake or stream bed alteration projects with your lake or stream bed alteration agreement. So help us connect the dots, please, through your scope of project document. Furthermore, we've had a lot of requests for building improvements as well as new building installation. These are viable projects, but we really need to see if it's a building improvement, that building is permitted or in the permitting process, and that the improvements we're talking about perhaps are tied to the corrections that are associated with your building permit application that you're trying to move forward. Additionally, if you are asking for $50,000 currently, $80,000 in the next round, perhaps for a building that's going to be, significantly more, say $150,000, $200,000 or more, please outline the entire scope of that building's project, including how you will cover the remainder of the cost of completing that building project when the equity grant funds that you're applying for aren't going to cover the whole expense associated with getting that project completed. This is important for risk and for county council to see. And so I want to just be upfront about that expectation. Last but not least, I don't have really any guidance to provide folks on rent and lease agreements, not official or in writing today, but we are able to move forward rent and lease agreements, especially when they are to a third party. County Council is still conducting research on this. They have had a number of meetings with GoBiz and GoBiz Legal on this item. And they have not completed the research on how to, say, create and award a rent or lease agreement when the applicant or the awardee is the same as the ownership on the property. So we will get guidance out to folks just as soon as we have some clarity from County Council. But the rent and lease agreements that we have awarded funds for to date are to third-party entities. Just provide some clarification there. Moving forward, we have been, I should say, staff has been incredibly busy with waivers. They have been processing waivers like mad through August and into September. We had tracking catch up on Department of Ag and are now at $2,700 and change to Department of Ag to the tune of 22 waivers for skill certs. Planning and building services, quite a jump here. We went from 41 waivers to 50 waivers in July. We're at 160 building permit fee waivers to the tune of $42,153.19. Treasurer tax collector, we really have seen an increase in waivers and really frankly at this time of year we're seeing a lot of waivers for delinquent taxes. So we're at 196 waivers to TTC. There's a small number of waivers in this count that aren't tax related, that are business licenses, cannabis facility business licenses specifically. And so to date, what I had on the books setting up for this meeting is I think, an incorrect number here. I think I typed it in wrong, but we're at over $400,000. So I will double check that and get back to folks. We'll make sure that it's correct for sure when we post it online. MCD, we're running a heck of a lot of renewals right now. So we've had a jump in waivers for, I think, largely renewals and modifications today. We're at 47 waivers for MCD related fees to the tune of $33,613.37. Round 1 and 2 had set aside waiver totals of 1.4 million and change. Oh, this is correct. I'm sorry. We are at $495,978.98 in waivers issued to date, which means when you break that down by individual waivers, we have issued 381 waivers to assist awardees or eligible applicants in meeting their permitting and tax compliance needs. Some eligibility data. Still continually processing eligibility. I don't have September numbers. Paula's now joining us today because she, lucky girl, is on vacation. I'm very happy for her and her family. So we're sticking with the numbers I pulled out of the board update from earlier this week, just yesterday. It seems like so long ago. So as of the end of August, we had awarded or certified equity eligible 206 individuals. We've got 283 applications to date, which means we're still processing a little over 70 odd applications for eligibility right now. A reminder about what the round 4 benchmarks are. So for the next round of funding, local jurisdictions had to have spent down their round 1 funding and no less than 80% of their round 2 funding. We have spent down 100% of our round 1 and round 2 funding, making us eligible for round 4 solicitation. So we're looking forward to that application, which again, I don't have the timelines or the dates for, but we will be applying for a 4th round of funding. I want to talk a little bit about our next round of direct grant applications. We are still working with folks who applied while round 1 and round 2 was open. We've taken the approach with this program of working with grant applicants until we have a document or a proposal, a scope of project, I should say, and a budget that the underwriters, Elevate Impact Mendocino team, is underwriting until the underwriters feel confident can come to the department for approval. So we remain committed to working with everyone who has applied to date and believe we'll have plenty of funds to manage awards for folks. So what we're going to do next is open the next round of applications on November 1st, and we're going to close it on January 7th so that we can have ample time to work with not only the folks in the queue right now to get awards out, but also the next group of applicants. We want to make sure we have ample time to work with folks to get all of round 3 spent down and then move into round 4 funding, which I'm excited that we're now going to be eligible for. When we open up this next round of grant opportunities, grant awards will be available for up to $80,000. If you've already received a grant award, you can't exceed $80,000. You'll have to subtract the dollar amount you've been awarded from the $80,000, and you can apply for the difference. So if we awarded you $50,000 and you want to come in and apply for additional funding, your opportunity to do that is going to be November 1st. And then you can apply for the remainder between 50 and 80, which would be for $30,000, for example. We are getting ready to update the manual to ensure that the income tax program is available to those who apply in November, December, and early January. And a little more on what we're planning for direct grants for income tax relief. These monies will be offered in arrears. And I want to talk just a little bit about the difference between an in arrears program and a reimbursement program. A reimbursement program is a program that allows an individual to apply for funding to be reimbursed for a project they have already completed, expenses they have already paid. An in arrears program allows an individual to apply for a project or a funding opportunity that they want to spend in the future. So they apply for a project they want to complete and spend funds on in the future. The department approves that project. The awardee conducts those project components, submits with the receipts associated with that approved product, and then receives their check for that grant for that project after they've provided the receipts. So we're only doing this in relationship to income taxes. The remainder of our grant programs will remain upfront, but the income tax piece has been a really hard nut to crack as from a policy perspective. There are so many factors here to consider. So when we look at tax brackets, it's likely that almost everyone's going to have some type of deduction. Additionally, we have, how do we sort out the income tax bracket change that might occur because of a grant payment? How do we sort that out from all of the other tax related obligations associated with that income tax filing? And so this is what we've worked out with county council and kind of going back and forth with the state and trying to create a workable program that allows for some offsetting of the income tax liability that comes with receiving a grant award. So again, we're going to offer them in arrears, so you'll have to build it into your budget. Starting November 1st, you can build this into your budget, which will then allow you to set aside 3.8% of the grant amounts you are being or have been awarded if you were already awarded through the LEAP program. If you are accepting that award check as a business entity. If you are accepting the award check as a person, as an individual, you can set aside up to 13% of your grant awards for income tax purposes. And then we will cut the check to the individual or the business entity upon presentation of the tax statement showing that the income taxes have been paid. We believe this is probably the best approach, or it's at least the best approach we could come up with to ensure that we weren't awarding more monies than what were needed to pay down those income taxes. So this is what we're planning to put into the manual for income taxes specifically. Couple words on fee waivers, and then we'll spend plenty of time on discussion and Q&A. And I think before I go on to fee waivers, I want to remember to talk about budget modifications here. I know a lot of you have had questions, and there's two different types of conversations I want to have in relationship to what you do after you receive a grant award. So, you go through the grant underwriting process, you have agreement, which is a contract that is part of being approved. And all parties sign that contract. Basically, as an awardee, you enter into a contract with the county to use the funds provided to you in alignment or in the manner of which that agreement outlines, right, your scope of project and your budget. Now, budget modifications, when we talk about budget modifications, we're talking about changing entire projects. So let me provide an example here. We issue a grant award for $50,000 to Nina. I'm going to use Nina because she's easy to have a conversation with on this. And Nina says, well, Kristen, I need $10,000 for soil and amendments. I would like $10,000 to help offset my licensing cost. And I want to spend $30,000 on upgrading my solar system. And we say, oh, that sounds good, Nina. Your paperwork looks good. We can approve that. We give Nina $50,000. And a couple weeks later, she's like, I don't want to buy solar and amendments, and I don't want to spend this money on my licensing fee. I now want to spend $20,000 on lake or streambed alteration agreement projects. That is a modification. That's changing the entire scope but the scope of projects, right? So another example that we can talk about that's not a modification, but is a reconciliation project or a reconciliation adjustment. Nina says, I want $10,000 for soil and amendments. We say, great, good expense to spend on. I want $10,000 for licensing. Great, that's fine. I want $30,000 for my solar installation or upgrade. We say, great, that sounds great, Nina. Nina comes back and is like, holy cow, solar is expensive, and I forgot to account for this extra labor that I wasn't thinking about. And can I spend, instead of spending $30,000 on my solar project, can I spend $40,000 and not spend this grant money on my soil and amendments? That is a reconciliation adjustment, right? It's not adding a new scope of project. It's not, doesn't need to result in a new agreement that needs to go back through the county's internal review and approval process and be newly, freshly executed. Reconciliation amendments. We are prepared to work with folks to do reconciliation amendments. We are not prepared to work with folks to conduct budget and scope of project amendments. And we've been getting an alarming number of requests for brand new projects we haven't even considered to be allowed after the checks have been issued. I've talked to a couple different local jurisdictions about this. Some allow it, some don't. Humboldt County, for example, allows modifications after the fact, where you can literally add and subtract projects after being awarded. However, they staff one full-time department analyst to manage the modifications that equity awardees are requesting. We do not have the staffing for that. We do not have the staff allocated for that. And in order for us to consider offering that type of service, we would need an additional full-time staff person, at least one, I believe. Without that, we will not be able to manage working with new grant applicants. It would be a significant amount of time that would take away from us working with new grant applicants to get awards out the door. So I think if this is something that the public or our eligibility, certified eligibility applicants feel strongly about, we would need to go to the board, request an additional staff person, but also request general funds to cover the salary and the cost associated with bringing on an additional staff person. Now, I realize this is probably not what folks want to hear, but it is honestly where we're at and why we aren't willing to entertain modifications currently. We will entertain and work with Elevate Impact and County Council to develop a policy and a set of procedures for adjusting your budget within your approved projects, which can be done through reconciliation. Now let's talk about waivers briefly. The waiver program, I think, has been incredibly helpful. I think it's been a success. It does take some time for processing. I think generally, unless you're using a waiver for an MCD fee, we can enter that into Trackit or register that almost immediately. But it is usually a 4 to 6 week processing timeline by the time the waiver comes in via email or over the counter. We manage processing the finances to transfer those funds to another department, and then it shows up on that department's books, and the applicant or the awardee gets a receipt for the payment of that building fee or TTC expense, etc. I do want to make sure folks are aware that we did increase the waiver award limit to $30,000. And so it does make it a little more palatable as a way to cover delinquent taxes if you are in that situation. But yes, we did increase the award, to $30,000. Please do remember 1 waiver fee per form, or 1 tax per form. All of the waiver program forms can be found on the Cannabis Programs Form and Resources page. A little bit about TTC. We've got a lot of folks using waivers for their quarterly filings. So if you're interested in doing that, I encourage you, please do take us up on using a LEAP waiver if you're certified eligible for your quarterly filings. You'll want to go to the TTC and submit your quarterly filing, get it approved, tell them you're going to use a waiver. They'll give you the paperwork showing the filing amount once they've accepted it. And then you can bring that or email that over to us with the completed TTC tax waiver form. Those forms, again, on the website, available here in the lobby at the office. And if you need assistance, we can assist you at the front counter in completing your waiver form so that we can get your quarterly filing covered by a LEAP waiver. Delinquent taxes, same thing. If you have delinquent taxes you would like to cover using or pay using the waiver program, you'll need to first go to the Treasurer Tax Collector's Office, aka TTC, and pay all interest and penalties associated with your delinquent taxes. TTC will then give you a statement showing that just the tax amounts are due. You can bring or email that statement to us with your completed TTC waiver form, and we can go ahead and get that processed for you to get those delinquent taxes paid for. And in the spring, which is a ways away at this point, but in the spring of 2023, we'll be using, folks will be eligible to use waivers for their true-ups as well. MCD fee waivers. With MCD fee waivers, I want to just remind folks that you don't need to file, and you really can't file the waiver until the fee is due. So sometimes people get really excited, I think, and they're like, I want a waiver for a new permit and a renewal and an inspection and $700 of hourly rates. That's not how it works. So when you submit your renewal application, you can also submit a waiver form to cover the cost of that renewal application if you are certified LEAP eligible. That's one great example of using the waiver at the time the fee is due. Lots of people ask about, well, how do I pay for my Appendix G fees? I already submitted my Appendix G to you. Appendix G, we haven't been collecting fees on until we assign the Appendix G to a planner. So you can turn in your Appendix G. We'll do the initial administrative review to make sure that we can accept it as a complete document. And what we'll do then, when we assign it to a planner for review, we'll tell you, hey, Nina, we assigned your Appendix G for a review. We'll send Nina a note saying, would you please pay for your Appendix G so the planner can begin the review of your materials. and you can either submit a waiver or come to the counter during counter hours and pay for that Appendix G processing. So a couple examples there. Planning and building services is a little different, but I think people are getting the hang of it. I mean, we saw a doubling in a month of building permit fees being paid for by the waiver program. So with the planning and building services, permitting fees, how you manage the waivers there, you'll see on the Cannabis Program website on the Forms and Resources page, there is a PBS estimate of fees form. Please use only one form or put one estimate request on each form. So one estimate request per form. So if you have 14 hoop houses, those are 14 individual permits that you are seeking waivers for. You have to fill out 14 forms. And then once you fill out the estimate form, you can email it to Planning and Building Services. The email address is right on the form itself, or you can drop it off at Planning and Building Services. Planning and Building Services will then go through those forms that you are, or the form that you have submitted to them, not while you're standing there. So you can literally just drop it off. And what they'll do is provide the estimate, and then they send that estimate amount back to us, that same form as approved, showing a dollar amount and also showing the cost of what the fee will be in Trackit. We then process the payment and we pay out building and planning services for your approved estimate form, so to speak. And once Planning and Building Services has entered that payment into your building permit number, they will send you a receipt for that payment. Again, this process can take 4 to 6 weeks. But yes, we are seeing a tremendous increase on folks using the waiver program to permit their structures. And I'll do a little compliance reminder here. The ordinance does provide or have a clause in it, 2017 does, the use of unpermitted structures for cannabis projects is a deniable offense. So please, please, please do get your building permits. The county has not enforced that to date, but we're also currently not renewing folks who don't have their building permits. So lots of folks have been renewed multiple times and haven't managed to wrap this up. It's also important for your Appendix G submission that your structures are permitted. So really encouraging folks to wrap up those building permits as we're getting close to needing to get Appendix Gs finalized or at least completed. Other agency fees, we talked about the Cannabis Department fees, planning and building. If you have a Department of Environmental Health fee that you're looking at, you say you're putting in an ADA restroom for your commercial processing area, and you have a fee to environmental health associated with that septic system, perhaps, you can let us know and we'll work with you to get that fee waived if that's what you'd like to do. Well permits for cannabis irrigation, another opportunity for you to use a waiver from this program. We haven't had requests for Department of Environmental Health waivers, so we haven't developed a form to date, but we are more than happy to figure out how to work with you if you have Department of Environmental Health fees associated with your business, your cannabis business. What we are not providing waivers for, what LEAP is not providing waivers for, residential building permits, including Class K building permits, grading permits or well installation or permits for other activities that are not specifically cannabis related. And for example, we can't provide a waiver for state agency fees, state annual water resource control board fees. While LEAP is a program that you can use to pay those fees. You would have to build that fee specifically into your direct grant budget. Same example with Department of Cannabis Control. We can't waive those fees because we can't transfer funds from our local bank account or the county's bank account to the state's bank account. But you can build the cost of that state licensing fee into your direct grant budget and be awarded fee relief in that way. Oh, a couple more things about the direct grant program, and then I'm going to let everybody else talk here. Budget approval process. You want to prepare your scope of project and include a robust narrative explaining that project. Again, we talked a little bit about solar and making sure that you explain the solar or the electrical usage associated with your business entity and how your proposed solar project will offset that electrical usage or help manage that electrical usage. Lake and streambed alteration agreement projects, please do reference the project in your lake or streambed alteration agreement. And if you have multiple segments of culvert associated with any one of those projects, please do align how you're going to use these 3 pieces of culvert for project 1, right? It's very, very helpful. And then it just makes it process and move forward in a more timely manner. We talked about building projects and we talked about leases. So let's move forward. This is in an ideal world, right? And so a lot of times underwriting is 4 to 6 weeks, but again, this really depends on how robust and descriptive your narrative is and how closely it matches the budget that you put together and the receipts or the invoices or estimates that you're providing the Elevate Impact folks. So underwriting is generally 4 to 6 weeks. It may take longer, it may take less time. Grant approval, we were doing weekly meetings, an hour a week. We're now up to 2 weekly meetings most weeks, and we've scheduled those meetings for 2-hour blocks to try to really help move this process along. So I think we're still in the 3 to 4 weeks for grant approval once you've completed underwriting. We are going through a lot of rewrites right now. So the big part of the reason why we're pushing out the round 3 application is so we can get through all of these rewrites for folks that we've been working with for weeks, if not months. We want to get them wrapped up. We want to get them awarded before we start taking on the review of new projects. So it's really important for us. And I think it's probably really important for the awardees or the applicants we've been working with to make sure that we get them wrapped up before taking on more reviews and more projects. Once the grant has been approved, it takes Paula's team a little bit of time to write the grant agreement to get it customized for the needs of the awardee and make sure that all of the scope of project is accurate, the budget's accurate, the attachments are all sent over in a nice tidy package. And from there, MCD staff gets that contract processing by getting it into the Cobblestone platform and moving it forward. I'm super excited that we have a new hire with us. Heidi joined us as an administrative assistant over the last 2 weeks, and we'll be working exclusively with our grant and fiscal unit to really help with tracking the Cobblestone upload process. So we're pretty excited to have some additional hands-on from our side to make sure that we can get these through Cobblestone, hopefully in a 3 to 4 week fashion. Check processing can take another 3 to 4 weeks. Folks, when we are ready to issue a check, that grant agreement essentially gets approved by the departments and divisions in the county. It is then sent out for signature. This happens somewhat simultaneously. It comes to me for signature. It goes to the other department units and departments and their divisions for signature. And then it also goes to the awardee for signature. We've been using DocuSign to capture the awardee's signature. It's been hugely successful, but we have been told that the DocuSign sometimes goes to folks' spam boxes. So we've been trying to say, hey, please, we're sending it to you. We send an email and say, yes, we sent you a DocuSign. Please do watch for it. But a couple people, it's busy time of year. Folks miss emails and they're like, where the heck is my grant agreement? And they find it in their spam box. So this process of getting the signatures together, getting that agreement back to us, it goes back into Cobblestone and over to the auditor's office where they process it and then give us the green light to go ahead and request a check be issued. This can take 3 to 4 weeks. It can take longer if for some reason the awardee isn't signing their agreement. So we do watch the timelines on execution and the signing of grant agreements. And then we do try to courtesy call folks if we're like, woohoo, where are you? We're waiting for you to sign your agreement. And then it takes about 7 to 10 days after we've been able to request a check for that check to be fully processed, written, so to speak, and sent off to the awardee. This is somewhat old. There's nothing new here. This is about the misuse of funds, but the guidance for misuse of funds has been put into the updated program manual. It's a whole new section, so I encourage folks to please check it out. And when you are asked to sign your grant agreement, you're also asked to sign a form stating that you've read the section in the program manual that really explains responsibility for the proper use of funds. So, and I think we'll be able to do something similar as far as providing guidance in the program manual regarding leases, rent. I'm hoping we'll be able to get that into the program manual with the next round, but we aren't going to hold up the program manual to put the tax relief portion in it. We'll just do more updates if we need to so we can continue to move things forward. All right. That's what I have for today's presentation. Quite a bit of new information. I'm going to put the timer up so we can go through some, there we go. So we can go through some questions. And there are 15 questions in the chat box currently. I do want to start by trying to address some of those and making sure that if we did address some, I can click them off the box, so to speak. A quick reminder, the Q&A feature can be found by clicking on the chat icon that says Q&A underneath it in your toolbar if you are on the Zoom platform. That toolbar is often located at the bottom or the top of your screen. So you just click on it, it will pop up in a separate box, which then lets you type in your question or your comment. If you want to provide an oral question or comment, in that same toolbar, if you're on the Zoom app, there is a raise hand feature. Just click the raise hand feature, we'll see it, and then we'll be able to call on you. If you are not on the Zoom app and perhaps calling in today from your cell phone, you can raise your hand by using *9 to raise your hand. *9 will also lower your hand. And then when we call on you for verbal comment, oral comment, we're going to ask you to unmute your device. On the Zoom platform, you can use the mute microphone that is often in the toolbar, or you can hover your cursor over the box that identifies you, and that will give you a blue mute and unmute button. If you are calling in and want to make a verbal comment, you've raised your hand. When we call on you, you can mute and unmute using *6. I don't have the process available today at this meeting for adjusting items in your reconciliation process for your awarded grants, but we'll be releasing that information as soon as we have some written guidance for it. So I talked about that a little bit earlier, but just a reminder, I don't have that guidance to provide today. We are currently starting to award out of round 3. That's happening now. I don't think round 3 is fully committed. So, the question is, folks are wondering if they should bother applying for grants now, or if it's anticipated that all of round 3 funds are likely committed. Now, we have local jurisdiction assistant grant monies coming online. We will be bringing that program back to the board in October and plan to open it up almost immediately following. And I don't know exactly what those timelines look like, but I think we'll be able to bring that information forward with at least a proposal to the board in October. But that program is really specific to prioritizing equity grant applicants. So as we're moving into round 3, when people apply for LEAP grant funds, LEAP has a scope, let's just say, of what's allowed to be applied for direct grant opportunities. That's about this big, right? It's pretty expansive. The LGAGP funds have a narrower scope and are really focused on projects that are associated with your CEQA compliance, Lake or Streambed alteration agreements, water board requirements, 401 permitting. So what we plan to do as we move into, now that we've met our spend down deadlines to make us eligible for round 4 funding, is we can start drawing down LJAGP direct grant funds to ensure that the LEAP program's availability goes farther so that there's more bookkeeping opportunities available to LEAP eligible applicants, because the capital improvement projects such as solar to replace internal combustion engines or pond development to ensure ample water storage and reduce groundwater usage, that those pieces are paid down by LJAGP, but you can apply, you don't even have to think about it through the LEAP program, and we can utilize those funds to ensure that there's more money for a broader diversity of opportunities through LEAP. So it's a little hard to describe. Hopefully I nailed it, but we can ask questions in just a minute. A couple more. I don't have status on the rent issue. Third-party rental and lease agreements do not seem to be an issue. The issue currently that County Council is investigating and conducting research on, that we're waiting for guidance on, is when the awardee is the same person as the landowner. So we will, and or related, domestic partner, husband, wife, etc. So as soon as we have additional guidance, we'll be sure to get it out to everyone in writing. Payroll is a legit budget item. We have been offering payroll, but again, this kind of is similar to the rent and lease agreements between the awardee and the awardee, so to speak. We've had some payroll items that have gone through and not been a problem, but we've had some payroll items that have been hard. And largely these are when the awardee is proposing to pay themselves. Now, this is another area where County Council is doing research or conducting research, and we do intend on providing guidance just as soon as we have it. So there are no income requirements associated with grant eligibility for this program. Requirements for eligibility are all available on elevateimpactmendo.com. You can apply for eligibility on that website electronically. You can apply for grants on that website electronically. And so the eligibility requirements, we really limited those to showing that folks have been, that the individual has been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. someone has not yet submitted an initial LEAP eligibility application, will there be enough time to review that and make a determination as to the eligibility before the next round of grants open up if they submit the initial application soon? You know, I don't know. I would hope so, but again, there's about 70 applications for eligibility in the queue currently that our underwriters are working through. And some of the timeline associated with any application, whether it's for eligibility or a direct grant, really has to do with the quality of that application. So, are the materials are there? Is the evidence of disproportionate impact there? But this is what I would say. Please don't wait to apply for eligibility. Just because we're talking about a timeline of November 1st through January 7th for the next round of grant applications to be received, we hope to award all of round 3 down by the end of May and move into round 4. And we're going to keep reviewing and working with those folks that come in, and then we'll open up another round as we're ready to take on more applicants to review and work with. So, and we hope to keep this program funded in perpetuity. We are not looking at an end to this program. We're treating this program like we will continually be eligible for grant applications with the state and be able to receive awards. So please don't wait to apply for eligibility. Now, I'm tired of hearing myself talk, so I'd like to go to folks who have their hand raised. We have 3 folks with us today who have raised their hands. So we're first going to hear from Michael Katz, followed by followed by Paul Hansberry. I'm sorry, Paul, I'm a little tired today. And then Hannah Nelson. So Michael, you should be able to go ahead and unmute your device and start your question or comment.
Great. Thanks so much, Kristen. My first comment just related to the presentation is that for some of the slides that are kind of just data or information that, you know, maybe some of which has been shared before, maybe some of which is just going to be shared in the slides, it might be more time effective to answer more questions and to have more engagement if some of those weren't just kind of read verbatim. Like, we definitely appreciate some of the presentation, obviously, but some of it seems like, you know, it doesn't require a line by line reading of each slide, but definitely appreciate the thoroughness. And then my question globally for the equity allotments, I understand the idea that this program is going to, you know, hopefully will continue certainly as long as possible. But just looking at the amount of funding that is already in place and the fact that 34 or so direct grant awardees, you know, received about $1.7 million in direct grant funding, given the fact that there's over 200 folks who have already been identified as equity eligible, and there's almost another 100 that are in process, I'm having trouble understanding the thinking behind increasing direct grants for people who have already received direct grants, but without ensuring that those other 200 plus people could have access to the grants at all. And so I'm just wondering if there's some further explanation that can be provided as to the thinking of that, knowing that even though we hope funds will continue to come in, at this time we have a finite amount and want to make sure that they get distributed as widely as possible. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that, Michael. You know, I don't disagree with not covering the data-rich slides thoroughly. They do feel, to me personally, a little bit duplicative in the sense that we're also reporting that same information. I mean, it might be slightly different dollar amounts between the board report and these meetings. So we could probably back off some of the narrative in that regard. And if folks don't like that, they could let us know, right, during these comment sessions. You know, I want to say, like, I understand the concern about what might seem like a finite pool of money. You know, the biggest spending that we see right now in direct grants are in capital improvement projects. And it's pretty significant amount that would qualify to be offset, so to speak, by LJAGP funds. that LJAGP direct grant pool, I'm tired today, is nearly $10 million. So there is a robust amount of money there. The LJAGP program is supposed to prioritize spending with the equity eligible or equity certified demographic that we serve. So I really think that that's kind of the biggest place where we can draw funds from to ensure that this program moves forward in a robust and thoughtful manner. So based on the calculations and what we're looking at, I think we're going to be able to help a heck of a lot of people, and that will be fine going to $80,000 because, again, the largest pool of spending that we're seeing is in projects that would qualify for LJAGP monies. Okay, let's reset the timer. We're going to go to Paul Hansberry, followed by Hannah Nelson, and then Tamara Kislik. Okay, so Paul, you should be able to go ahead and unmute your device.
Hi, yes, thanks very much. A few things. The rent or lease, or for that matter, mortgage, if you own the property, it's an ongoing expense. I mean, if I don't pay my mortgage, I lose the property, and then I can't, even though it's a residential, it's a home business. So if I don't pay my mortgage, I lose the property and I can't conduct business. So could you maybe talk to county council or GoBiz about that? We don't have the ability to do that. Speaking of the ability to do that, as far, you say that there's been an onslaught of people that are asking how to modify their direct grant for a number of different reasons. Maybe because it wasn't allowed, when they got their grant. Maybe it was because things are coming on. There's still things that are coming on, like you said that the residential. If they own the property, they're still talking about that. But if they get their funds, then they can't modify their grant. There's change orders in every contract. And a process for that. So if you're getting this onslaught of people that want to do that, could you please be our champion and go to the board and request for an additional staff so that this is a possibility? This happens in every walk of life with every contract. As far as the percentage for income tax, if it's an individual and it's 13% is allowable, then what happens to that money if for some reason that money isn't spent? Do you have to is that part of the reconciliation process, or does it go back into the pool? How does that work? I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to cut you off there, Paul. Thank you for those questions. I'm looking forward to answering them to the best of my ability. I think we are going to have a conversation with the board. I'm planning on doing it in October about additional staffing. Because we'll also be bringing contract administrators contract forward. So I think that's a great time to have a conversation about whether or not the board can provide us with an additional staff person so that we can offer these modifications. But I just want to be really honest with everything. When there is no way for us to manage that sort of additional work with staff we have currently. So it'd have to be a new allocation, like a position specific to supporting that service. I do plan on having that discussion with the board in October. We haven't quite figured out the detailed budget mechanics of our internal processing for income taxes, but I can say this. What we envision essentially is an income tax pool, right? So Nina sets aside 13% of $50,000. I set aside 13% of $50,000, but really Nina only needs about 8% of that. So those monies then could be left in that pool for the next person, right? So we wouldn't have to pull a full 15% out or 13% out of the grant award fund, right? To cover the next person's 13% in taxes. We would just have to pull an additional 10% out because Nina only spent 10% of hers. I'm hoping that makes sense, but we're we're literally looking at creating a pool, so to speak. So if folks don't claim, right, in their in arrears request for income taxes, or when they show us the receipts for income taxes, if they don't spend what was set aside, that money just stays there for the next person, so to speak. And as far as how the details and mechanics work, we are having meetings internally, and we'll be having some meetings with the auditor's office to make sure that that's set up. And also it's going to be important to make sure that that's set up in a way that shows that we've set funds aside for income taxes so that we can count them as having been spent down, okay? With that said, I think I hit both of those. We're going to go to Hannah Nelson, followed by Tamara Kislak, and then Karen Byers. So Hannah, let me reset the timer. We've provided you permission to talk, so you should be able to go ahead and unmute your device and begin.
Thanks, Kristen. Good afternoon. By the way, I think Michael was suggesting that you just don't read each one, not that you don't provide the slides, because I think it is helpful to provide the slides again.
Yeah, that was my thought too, Hannah. Yeah, we're on the same page.
So, okay. And then with respect to the modification issue, I think that early on we had suggested that if there were alternative menus of qualified budget items that were approved, maybe not, huge quantities, but a few additional items that were approved that could easily, were pre-approved and could be swapped out if for some reason or another the processing took a lot longer. Like you were saying, it's 4.5 months in an ideal world, but it's actually potentially longer than that. And some costs have to be paid for and can't be reimbursed and blah, blah, blah. So that's one thing. And then also, simple contract modification, County Council actually did confirm that that's just a pretty routine thing and not that difficult. And with respect to getting staff, that's a good idea. And maybe there could be dedicated grant staff so that it covers for not just equity grant, but also the LJGAP, because I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of administrative issues that you would need help with as well. Speaking of LJGAP, I'm wondering if there can be a separate strategy session for applicants on how best to dovetail their equity stuff with the LJGAP. And then with respect to the increase of the $30,000 for existing equity applicants, if they are being prioritized if equity applicants are already being prioritized in the LJGAP, then maybe it's important to also make sure that new equity people have a way into the equity grant and that non-equity people have some way into the LJGAP. Mm-hmm. And I think that's all I got. Probably more, but it's
okay. Well, we're out of time, so that worked out perfectly. I appreciate the suggestions and the recommendations. We are going to have a conversation with the board in October about staffing and planning for the LJGAP. I can say that what we're planning for that application is more of a form application. So if you have solar project, for example, you're going to want to answer specific solar questions. So we are putting together kind of a more robust application that our goal is to kind of direct and prompt people into providing us the information we need off the bat. So we have less back and forth. That's our goal in what we're framing and shaping currently. So I'm hoping it will make it a lot easier for both the applicant and for the department who will be reviewing those LJGAP grant applications. It's not so much that the contract modification is what takes time when we're talking about modification. It really is there's a whole layer of review that comes along with proposing new projects, right? So it's the review time and the underwriting associated with new scope of projects and new budgets. And again, this is why we would be requesting additional staff, is to help support that review time. So It's not so much what happens in the contractual paperwork itself. It's getting all of the I's dotted, the T's crossed, so to speak, for those new scope of project, getting those approved, getting those move forward. I think some guidance on how to dovetail your LJAGP and LEAP grant agreements is a great opportunity. And I think we'll have lots of opportunity to not only prioritize equity eligible folks with that LJAGP funding pool, but to make sure that folks who aren't LEAP eligible have access to the LJAGP grants. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for the suggestions. We're going to go next to, let's see, there we go. Sorry, housekeeping. We're going to go next to Tamara Kislak and then Karen Beyer. And then I still have 16 open questions in the chat. I don't think we're going to get to everything that has come in today. So Tamara, you should be able to unmute your device.
I'm here.
All right.
Okay, so I'll try and keep it quick. I started this process probably at the end of last year. It's been a really long time. I haven't joined these meetings very often. I've mostly been working with my grant administrator. And my question to you, I fall into this, I didn't even learn until recently that I'd fall into this rent limbo situation. But they suggested that I create a new budget. And so I've been going back and forth with them about budgeting items. And it seems to me, from my point of view, that they don't fully understand A, cannabis regulations, B, what you guys are looking for. And so I'm wondering how often you talk to these guys or lady, my person is a lady, and how you guys are communicating, because, you know, my point of contact, I'm not getting a lot of information. It's a very frustrating process. And so I'm just wondering how we can get the information we need to apply for the things that you're actually aren't going to require a whole bunch of back and forth.
Okay, great. You know, I think the process has been a little frustrating for us as well. When I started with the department a year ago, March in 2021, I did not understand the amount of development that still needed to be done for this grant program. And really, it wasn't until October when we finally got the board to fully remove the income thresholds that we could even get people eligible. So a lot of where we've been with these initial grant reviews and grant awards has been learning and developing as we're awarding. Not ideal for anyone, not ideal for department staff, certainly not ideal or friendly to our eligible applicants, right? I think this is why I really want to move forward with kind of a robust form submission kind of platform or framework for LJAGP. So it's a little more, hopefully a lot more intuitive, frankly, for the folks who apply for LJAGP. I personally meet with our grant administrators twice a week, usually in 2-hour blocks, to review budgets. And when we review budgets together, I write out my request to the applicant. Sometimes what happens, and I'm not saying Tamara that this is, or Tamara, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly. I'm not saying that this is specific to your situation, but I have worked with a number of applicants through our contract administrators who I send back a series of comments that might say, hey, please explain how these 3 segments of culvert will be utilized for these 2 Laker Stream Bed Alteration Agreement projects. And can you please reference, this project code on this page, this project code on this page, etc. And sometimes what happens is people are like, don't want to do Lake or Stream, but I'm coming back with 3 new different projects, which leads to a whole nother round of comments from the department, perhaps. Again, a lot of what we're seeing as the larger expenses in these LEAP grant awards or grant agreements are capital improvement projects. And they need a planning lens on them. What we currently don't have in the Elevate Impact pool of staff are folks who have planning background. So for them, when I talk about a lake or stream bed alteration agreement, even though I'm trying to train them as we're doing these reviews by sharing the screen and showing what I'm seeing in the narrative versus what I'm seeing in a LSAA, it's a steep learning curve. So I think this is one of the things that has me nervous about LJAGP and not wanting to contract it out unless that administrator has planners. I think it's going to be really hard for them to understand the nuts and bolts of a capital improvement project that comes forward. So, we're learning as we go. We're doing on-the-job training in real time, but I think the hang up or the disconnect is not having that planner oversight. That's really important to moving the capital improvement projects forward, and they are the hardest ones to move forward. We're going to go to our next caller, which is Karen Byers. Karen, I'm going to go ahead and unmute or allow you to unmute your device. You should be able to go ahead and unmute and start your comment.
Yeah, hi. So I've already received my eligibility for my state fee waiver. Does that assist in a quicker eligibility approval for my county's program, or does all of that just have to come again?
2 separate programs, 2 separate requirements, completely separate. So,
and then could you just tell me what LLGAP stands for?
Oh, so sorry. Local Jurisdiction Assistance Grant Program.
Okay, and then I know that the California Community Reinvestment Grants are now available. And are there other grants? I mean, this may not be the time for this conversation, but do you know of other grants that are coming out of GoBiz that are part of the Cannabis Revenue Program? I mean,
I don't. I'm
that's all right.
Here, like what we've got on our plate. So I have not been diving into other resource areas.
I'll look into it and send it to you. There you go.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Karen. Okay. We have a couple more things. Let's see. So again, the income tax program that we're bringing forward is not a reimbursement program. It's an in arrears program. So you can apply for up to 13% of your total grant award to be held aside for the purposes of paying income taxes if you're receiving that tax payment as an individual. If you're receiving or you're proposing tax support as a business entity, you can ask the county to hold aside up to 3.8%. And then when you file your taxes in the spring, you can file your taxes. You can go ahead and pay those taxes. You can bring that statement to us and we'll release that money that we've set aside if it doesn't exceed the amount of your income tax payment. So I really hope that helps to clarify and we can provide some more information. Again, we have applications aren't going to be available until November. So we'll have this conversation again next month. And between now and then, we'll be bringing forward an updated LEAP manual, which will have some additional information in it, which should help, gosh, I hope, certainly help to clarify the new program. All right, everyone. We are at 5 p.m. sharp, 5:01. I do want to go ahead and adjourn today's meeting. I thank all of you for attending. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of your questions. We'll take Michael up and Hannah up on their suggestions to not go through every single slide, but to provide the information and see if we can get more Q&A in our next meeting. So thanks everyone. You might have gotten a double dose of us today. We thank you for joining us and we hope you have a good evening. We're going to go ahead and sign off. Thanks.